Hi, I'm Seamless, and this is the 47th 75K tutorial. This one was requested by Vi3E, and I actually think I've done a 75K from this person already, or at least a 40K or something. But I don't really care because I like the sound, and the sound is from PhaseOne, from his track Extinction, and it sounds like this. In particular, he requested the guitar sounding thing. Now here's the thing, I actually think that's just a guitar. And if it's not a guitar, it would have been a lot easier if it was a guitar. I attempted to do this. This is me basically trying to synthesize a power chord. Now, like, really, the sound would have been super easier just if I just grabbed a guitar, broke out guitar rig, and just played a power chord. But it'd be cheap. So I had to give a shot at trying to make this work. So the citrus is actually a little bit complicated because whenever you're doing physical modeling, which is kind of what this is, a lot of stuff has to happen to try and make it feel realistic, and this really doesn't do a super great job at that. But so it begins with stuff as a saw wave, and then it randomized phases, you know, that whole deal. Like we saw convert sine harmonics, randomized phases. You can do this in Serum, by the way. And then it's being modulated by a real saw, but an octave lower. So this is pseudo oscillator sync that is happening when you do this sort of thing. But the sort of result of this is that like even without all this, like you see kind of like the harmonic profile coming out of there. If we looked at just these two guys, you see that kind of thing happen. I just trying to do something. Yeah. It's like without this, notice the distance between that harmonic and that harmonic. It's the regular saw series. And if you ever look at a guitar, like a guitar signal, at the lower, especially the lower notes, they're not necessarily cleanly the right series. And it has to do with how strings work and where you plug it and all that kind of stuff. So, modulating it by a saw by one octave lower, it gives us that kind of that behavior, and it has that added benefit of also kind of working out to being a power chord-ish like thing when everything is all, you know, said and done. Now I have a whole bunch of ring modulation going on, and the point of the ring modulation is they're mostly it's even just the same oscillator, and then a little bit of feedback going on there. But the whole point of this is that they're all different pitches, and they're also modulating. I have the pitch moving around in LFOs, so that it's always changing, and this is to kind of simulate just differences in the string. Not only that, but in the unison index mapping, they're like the mod levels, as in how much they're being modulated, and not the volume, because it turns out when you modulate the volume of a ring modulator inside Citrus, it doesn't do anything, and I believe that's a bug. But the whole point of this is that we're doing left and right, because you're double tracking guitar. Although the example in the PhaseOne track is kind of a lot more mono than you might expect. But in regular like rock or metal, you double track. You play one left and one right. It's the same part, the same signal. It's just done twice, left and right. This is why when you use guitar rig, you might notice that there's a left-right option. And that whole thing is so. And when you do that, it sounds really big and like perfectly stereo. And that's because of all the difference. Even if you play the part identically both times, just the differences in just physical reality of playing the string is enough and evenly distributed enough that it is completely different, but also similar enough that it doesn't feel lopsided, which is super hard to do synthetically. So that's what this is attempting to demonstrate. And then when I have two voices, it makes a little bit more sense. And then the phase and the pitch is super light, and panning is not super, you know, huge. It'd be in line with the original. A little bit of noise going on in there, and then it's all going into a filter, which is a low pass, and it's just kind of doing one of these, which is kind of what happens when you pluck a string. You know, kind of. And then extra FM, like from number 5 here, and doing the noise, which isn't really doing anything. And then this is just convoluting things more. It's so far below, and it's also on the ring modulation that the effect isn't super present. But it does enough, and I put it up at 3 here to try and, again, to accentuate the power chordiness of it all. And then that gets put through this EQ, which is loosely sort of set to being things, and then it gets distorted. This is probably going to be super loud. Now it's kind of hard to tell because I'm in asymmetrical mode here, but the sort of the important thing that's happening is actually right here. And let's go do this in like a regular wave shaper in nothing. So actually, it was an ImageLine video that taught me about this. That apparently in guitar cabinet, like with like valves, and when they were first kept being a thing that was like vacuum tubey distortion kind of overdrive thing, it was a particular kind of distortion referred to as crossover distortion, where the signal right at the bottom part got pushed up a whole bunch, and then it would be more or less normal, but you can amplify it, up above it. And that's how a lot of guitar distortion starts. So that's the sort of where I began in doing this whole thing, was that. And then I just kind of dicked around. Like, the guitar distortion is not super complex. It's helped a lot by the fact that the guitars, like the physical properties of a string and the signal or whatever, like are conducive to convolving it enough that it behaves the way we expect it to. And then, so like in a guitar signal chain, you have a guitar head and cabinet. Now, the head is responsible for doing distortion, and if you listen to a distorted head, like if you just took a head straight out, put it in your DAW, it would sound like this. It would sound like this papery kind of like that distortion. And actually, it would sound a little bit harsher than that, but that's more or less what we get out of a guitar head. Now, the guitar cabinet, a speaker cabinet, the actual like stacks and racks you see when you see people play guitar or whatever, those speakers are not perfect. In fact, they're like specifically unperfect. They are very far away from what we refer to as full spectrum speakers, like what you would find in a PA, power amplifier, public address. But they, system, the whole thing, whatever, live PAs, that kind of thing. Like, those are full spectrum speakers that are designed to play the full, 20 to 20 kind of thing. But the guitar cabinets have like no definition in the high end, like in the highest of high end. Some of them are a little bit better about that, and some of them do actually have full range. But then the cabinets themselves are doing emulation to make them feel like that, because that's sort of what we're used to hearing. And that curve kind of looks like this. I say it kind of looks like this because this is not super duper perfect in terms of like actually doing this. If I wanted to go full out, what I would have done here is I would have actually gone and found what's called a guitar cabinet impulse response file, an IR, guitar cabinet IR. In fact, if you just search cabinet IR, you'll find billions of free ones, because people can actually make them themselves. And what they are is it's kind of like an impulse. It's an impulse response file. It's like you would think of a reverb impulse response file, and it actually works the same way. And in fact, you can just load it right up into the Fruity Convolver. Just turn the dry all the way off, the wet all the way up, and have the guitar cabinet impulse response in there, and then it would do the job. And the job it's doing is that it would essentially be a particular profile, an EQ profile, more or less, like what I'm doing here, that sounds like whatever guitar cabinet setup that a person actually used to record the impulse response. And also the microphone. The microphone is a big part, like the curved position or whatever, the microphone is a big part of particular kinds of guitar sounds that we're used to. The way that works is actually pretty sweet. What they do is they run a sine wave sweep from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz through the cabinet, through your amp head, through whatever, basically the whole signal chain, like from its position to the head. Not usually without distortion on, it'll be like a clean version. Sometimes it will just be straight through the cab itself, but it requires some amplification for it to actually go through it enough for it to like make the speakers do their job. And then through the microphone, and then into the DAW, and then that whole single chain, they do a 20K sweep up and down, and the convolver will deconvolver. There's a Voxengo or whatever, people who make span make a convolver thing that does this sort of thing, and it essentially looks at a 20K sweep, which it knows it's supposed to be a perfect 20K sweep, which means that like even response all the way through. But because the cabinet isn't perfect, there'll be little dips and troughs and perks and whatever, and it'll essentially measure the difference and create an impulse response file that will create that difference when dropped into a convolver, into the Fruity Convolver. So you put that after distortion, and it's essentially a matched EQ of that particular guitar cabinet. And so when you Google guitar cabinet IR and you see billions of them, people went and made them, and those are like the EQ matched versions of those particular guitar cabinets. The ones that are in like Guitar Rig and Amplitube and Revolver and that kind of thing, those are also impulse response files, but they are somewhat specialized to work with their particular environment. Some of them are manipulatable to a certain degree that may not be necessarily true for just straight up audio files. And you might see like a crossfight between different microphones, that kind of thing, or even like, I mean, just to give you an example, Guitar Rig, oops, this is a head emulator that I like. Guitar Rig 5 has a thing called the Control Room Pro, and what this is, I apologize for tiny Guitar Rig. What this is that you have 8 individual ones, and then you can pick different, cabinet styles. And I mean, and then you have different microphones, which is pretty sweet. And then you have different microphone positions. Every single one of these was an individually recorded impulse response. So they recorded one for this mic for this position, and then this position, and then this position, and then this mic at this position, and that position for this cabinet over and over again. And there's a bunch of these for these, and different cabs have different mics available. Some of them don't have all the mics available. Some of them have different mics available. It's pretty interesting, actually. And that's what all of those are. And while this is what is going on inside Guitar Rig, you can absolutely find these, not necessarily those specifically, but you can find the comparable impulse response files like just in Google by yourself. However, I'm just doing this with Equalizer because I don't want to do that. Yeah. I'll put up this FLP. Actually, no, I'll turn it to a patcher because why would I? This isn't really, I'm not playing anything. So I'll make a patcher, and then that patcher will be available for download in the description of this video. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. If you'd like to make a request yourself for a whole 75K thing, please do so in the Reddit thread linked in the description of this video. I know that I took a request from a YouTube comment because it was Muzzy, but that's because it's Muzzy, and Muzzy's my bro. You ain't my bro. Anyway, yeah. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and as usual, have a nice day. Did I already say that? I might have already said that. Repeating myself for the win.